Hello, welcome back. You're listening to All Bodies, All Foods. I'm Sam, and I'm here with Ashleigh. We are so thrilled today to have this conversation with authors of the book Beyond Body Positive, a mother's science-based guide for helping girls build a healthy body image.
Mm.
Welcome to the show, Janet and Ashley.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, we would love to learn more about you both. Specifically, what inspired you to write a book not only about body image, but this is really a book designed to help mothers raise their daughters in this culture that we know is obsessed with appearance, dieting, weight loss. What was the inspiration?
Well, I'll go first. I had been trying to make some healthy behavior changes. I was trying to get into a structured, committed exercise program because that was not something that I was doing previously. And about that time, my daughter was also 7 or 8 years old, and I was thinking about, some of the things that, some of the thoughts and attitudes I had toward my own body, and I was wondering because a lot of people say my daughter is my mini me, or she looks just like me, or whatever. So I was
Mm,
kind of wondering, how will she view her body? Given that I feel the way I do about mine and we look so much alike. But Janet and I, in addition to being colleagues and collaborators, are friends. And so we would talk about this stuff as women do and
Mm.
kind of merging our social psychology and developmental psychology perspectives. We kind of identified that there was a lot of science on this that wasn't being integrated and wasn't necessarily accessible to everyday moms. So
mm, mhm.
thought somebody needs to write that book. And as it turned out, we ended up just writing the book.
Just to add to that, there's a great literature on adult women and their body image struggles and lots of work on that. And there's a whole separate literature on children, girls.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start to look at those literatures, you see that those things are intertwined and that if we want to build healthy body image, moms are super important and starting early is super important. And so we got really inspired to say, hey, we want to share all of this in a way that's accessible, that provides tips to moms. And really, we say moms, really, we're talking about, the primary key caregiver. Most of the literature focuses on moms because they tend to be the primary caregiver. They're the major attachment figure, but certainly we recognize, there's different family configurations. There are tips that everybody can take and employ to help our girls build a healthy body image.
That's great. This is so needed. And I love that you brought up this idea of oftentimes girls are called the mini me of their moms. Like, I don't, do you experience that, Ashley? I know Ashley has a 3-year-old.
Yeah, I was going to tell you guys at some point, because I probably would talk about her too, but bring in my 3-year-old. Yeah, I experienced that a lot in personality, which is really fun. But I'm super excited to have this conversation too, because again, I'm a mom of a 3-year-old girl. And so this feels like a very real space for me, to be quite honest. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was thinking to myself, I've spent a lot of time in my career focusing on helping adolescent girls. At Renfrew, at our residential center, we take ages 14 and up. So a lot of my focus has been on teenage girls, young adults, and even older adults. And this is really fascinating to me, the thought that we can start as early as 3. I mean, I was really shocked to read that. I know we'll dive into that. But yeah, the idea of like starting so early, the hope that maybe we can prevent body image issues, eating disorders. I'm really thinking this conversation can give hope to a lot of people out there trying to help their kids.
I think so, definitely. And that was one of the things that occurred to Janet and I in our discussions kind of leading up to all of this is, the women who are grappling with these issues today were once girls and then they were
Mm.
once adolescents and
Yeah.
nobody was just sort of viewing this as a lifespan problem. And In fact, it begins developing in early childhood, and women are going to deal with body image issues, concerns, dissatisfaction, whatever, throughout the entire lifespan. I mean, the data suggests that even in their 70s, when like, women are really concerned with aspects of their appearance.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's not something where you wake up one day and you hit an age where you're like,
Right.
okay, I feel pretty good about my
Mhm.
body. And it makes sense because we're just bombarded with these messages of what we should look like, what we should weigh, what beauty is. And it makes sense. It affects every age at every
Mhm.
developmental stage.
Yeah, exactly. I think people are surprised, like what would you tell a 3-year-old or what does a 3-year-old know about their body, right? Because we do tend to think of it as a tween or teen problem. And yet, if you look at what the culture is doing, and if we look at where body image lives, it's part of your self-concept. And that's your ideas that you have about yourself that start to develop very early as a
Mm,
preschooler. And you're in a culture that is emphasizing diets and appearance from the get-go, as you're saying, you're pummeled with it. And so, children who are 3 years old, they know thin and fat. Children who are preschoolers already show weight bias, in some cases body dissatisfaction, right? And so that to us indicates, well, we need to go in and do preventive work here so that that doesn't become crystallized. And
mm,
sure, we can always intervene. It's always useful to intervene whenever we can, right? But certainly taking a more preventive approach and giving girls tools to deal with the culture, because the culture is not going to go away, but we can arm you with tools. We can make you more resilient to what that culture is sort of going to be doing to you. Yeah.
awesome. Yes, that's what we're hoping this episode will provide listeners with tools, tips, strategies they can use literally today or sometime this week. They can make a plan to try out some of this stuff with their daughters.
Yeah. You all, I was wondering if we could just kind of start at the basics or the starting point here with understanding your concept of body image, um, and talking maybe about the three major influences that forms or shapes or helps construct a child's body image.
Yeah. Thomas Cash, who is the, luminary of the field of body image science, wrote that body image is a multidimensional concept. That is not how it is kind of thought of in popular culture. In popular culture, it's reduced to a meme, basically. Love yourself, for example. But it really includes several parts, how we assess our features, our body's features, like its size or its shape, how we feel about its size or its shape, positive or negative evaluations or neutral.
Hmm.
And then how invested are we in these evaluations of our body as a part of our broader self-image? So Janet said earlier, and I think this gets lost in the conversation too, body image isn't this, you know, lone floating thing that we carry around in our
Yeah.
minds. It's a part of our self-concept, and how much of a part of our self-concept it is actually something that we can become intentional about. We can say, you know what, this is taking up a lot of space in my self-concept, but it's not actually who I am. Who I
Mm,
am is my personality, my accomplishments, my strengths, my sense of humor, etc. We could go on and on about women all day long. They're fabulous. And you get a sense for this when you look at a little girl you love. You don't really
Mhm.
think about her in terms of her appearance. What you think about her, yeah, her spunk, or her humor, her sassiness, whatever it is, or how loving she is. You don't think about her primarily in terms of her body.
mm,
So we just really don't want women and girls to be doing that,
Yeah.
when they have control over how much space this takes up in their minds. So we know that that it's a multidimensional concept, and it's influenced by three primary influences developing and growing up. One is parents, and for young girls, that will primarily be mom, since she is looking to model and emulate many of the behaviors that she sees in her mom. Um, And in addition to parents, we also have peers. We get plenty of information about our bodies and how they should look or what ours look like relative to others from looking around at our peers. And, in this social media age, that's not
Mm,
only limited to who we're going to school with, right? It's
Right,
also who we are friends with online.
right.
But then media is the third primary influencer. And again, there's a lot made of social media these days, but it includes all forms of media. And back in the day, we were reading our magazines, our fashion magazines, and following all the models back in the 90s and how thin they were.
Mm,
So media has been around ever since, the early 1900s with the Sears and Roebuck catalog, where it told us what you should look like in this outfit. And so media, peers, and parents are the three primary influencers.
yeah. I was just telling Sam before you all came on how just telling her a story about my daughter. So she is tall for her age and often gets mistaken for being older. And I went somewhere with a friend yesterday and it who also has a 3-year-old. And the conversation about, oh my goodness, she's so tall, she's so tall, she's so tall, just kept coming up. But it wasn't just the phrase she's so tall, it was like she's so big, she's so much bigger, I can't believe how big she is. And it I found myself stuck at some point because I wanted to be like, can we move on from this conversation? Can
mm,
we, and I just it has me thinking about how probably common it is or quote normal. You talk about with babies, like their size differences or just any sort of
mm,
differences.
Yeah.
It's like,
hmm
well, this baby can do this and this baby can do this. And my baby has always been long and tall for whatever reason, right? Genetics are funny. And that has always been a conversation that, at times we've talked about and also other people comment on constantly. And I guess I'm saying, like, it feels like there's maybe this shift from when it's okay and maybe it's not ever okay. But there does seem to be this shift when they're super, super young of like people just commenting constantly versus now, you all mentioned being 3. She is 3 and she is hearing stuff now. And it is
mm,
like, my husband and I have talked about this and talked about how we want to create a very safe and fun and welcoming and free space for her and how we don't want to use certain languages. But I don't know, I'm so thankful for your book because I would even love to learn tools, and how do I navigate this very real experience that I literally had yesterday.
right, right.
Yeah, and I think, because there are people out there that seem to think that this is some vapid, women complaining about their bodies sort of problem. And it's like, let's just step back and consider how important body image is, right? And
Yeah.
so when we consider these comments are not just comments that we should brush off our shoulders, they have meaning. They shape how we think about ourselves because, yes, people are saying things that are causing us to think about those things, and we can incorporate those into our self-concept. So if I'm a very young girl and I'm constantly hearing about my appearance, and especially if I feel like there's some evaluative judgment coming along with that rather than it being an observation, well, there you are affecting her self-concept. So it ought to be taken seriously. And, we control what our children ingest. We don't let them eat garbage off the ground, right?
Yeah.
So when people make these kinds of comments, I think we do have to some degree, be the person that is the protector until girls are old enough to sort of have the tools themselves. And, that's awkward because you don't want to be confrontational with friends or family, but there are ways to say, I noticed that you were talking a lot about her height in front of her, whatever characteristic, and you can say, I'm really trying to develop her awareness or her her self-efficacy, her perceived capability about her jumping skills, or we're talking a lot about numbers these days, and man, could you help me out and talk to her about that? And so you're just basically like channeling them for help rather than reprimanding them about what they're saying.
Mm,
Yeah,
I
and
like
understanding
that.
that they
I do
probably
too.
mean well, which, I
Yes.
think people are they just think, oh, we're just observing, but Ashley and I talked about this when people say stuff to girls like, you have your father's eyes or your mother's legs. Like, what does that mean for them? And
Right.
Mm,
especially if they've heard mom, especially say things about her legs, like, I have fat legs,
Yeah.
which women, we can get to that, often say these things and think, no one's hearing me, but your daughter is hearing and seeing those kinds of behaviors about your own body. And then what is she to conclude when people say your body is like her body, right? And so I think trying to, get people on board as allies in a non-defensive way is helpful. And then when girls are a little bit older, having a conversation with them directly about people will make comments. And in their families, maybe those are the kinds of things they do, and they'll make those comments to you. And here's a way that you can just say, I like to talk about this instead, right? And redirect the conversation yourself. It might take you a little while to develop that tool,
Hmm.
but we encourage that because that gives the developing girl autonomy, right? Like, actually, I'm going to steer the conversation differently. I mean, how often have we as women been subjected to that where somebody singles you out with a physical appearance thing that you're kind of like, I didn't really want that to be singled out right now. And
mm,
maybe you haven't even developed the tool to say, actually, I don't talk about weight changes or I don't talk about this or whatever it is. So we can actually arm you to expect it earlier and have a tool to deal with it earlier, but also try to get folks around you to be allies in a way that's just non-defensive and really giving people the benefit of the doubt and not assuming they're trying to be hurtful. They probably, for the
Yeah.
most part, just don't know. I
mm.
do think with things like weight, it gets a little more sensitive, where I think being a little more firm is a good thing if someone is commenting on weight, saying like, in our family, it's our policy really not to talk about bodies in that way, because that's one that is more shown to be more potentially damaging,
Yeah.
versus something like just a more surface kind of characteristic. But yes, I think, you're absolutely right. Like, it's smart to think about how do we protect and how do we also arm her so that she has the independence to deal with that herself, as she gets older. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
hmm. So, so you're saying that 3-year-olds, I mean, this is really young, and there might be parents out there listening, thinking to themselves, oh, come on. You say a 3-year-old's tall. They're not thinking about their body. They don't really care, right? And you're saying that 3 years old, that is a great time to start building positive body image because there are there are things that they're internalizing at that age.
Yeah.
So what does the research say?
Mhm.
I mean, is a little too young? Are we going to create body image issues that aren't even there? Parents might be thinking like, shouldn't we just leave well enough alone here?
Right, right. And
So
it's
yeah,
it's a
what's the research say?
yeah, it's a fine line. And to be clear, we're certainly not saying that any appearance comments are inappropriate. It is fine to tell a little girl she's pretty. It is fine to have occasional comments about physical appearance, but what we do know is the research shows that the self-concept is in fact developing early, and that when there are evaluative statements about people, children are absorbing those statements. We know that they're paying attention to good being associated with thin, right?
Mm,
And bad being associated with what they consider to be fat. We know that those messages are there. We know that there's some body dissatisfaction there. It varies depending on obviously the age, the amount of exposure, the timing of exposure. So I don't want to make generalizations for the research, but no one is saying that we're going to sit them down and say, now I'm going to teach you about body image. What we are saying
right.
is we do that indirectly by creating a self-concept that isn't so centered on physical appearance. Physical
Mm,
appearance is one part of you, but you're three and we want to hear about your skills. We want to cultivate your talents. We want to show you that there's so much to you that this is one little piece. And so it's not going to drive the bus. And the cultural emphasis on dieting and what you're supposed to look like, you'll be protected from that because that's not who you are. That's this
Hmm.
small little element to the side. And that is what you need to cultivate earlier, because if you're already 9 or 10 and so much of your self-concept is tied up in appearance and what you should look like and all of the shoulds, as they are for so many women, right? Then we have a lot of undoing to do versus
hmm.
saying, let's build this. And yeah, we're not ignoring appearance. It's great to take some pride in your appearance. Absolutely. We all do. It's natural. Ashley can tell you that as a social psychologist. We want to fit in with other people. We want to feel great about ourselves. Wonderful. But for women, that takes up too much of the piece of the pie.
Hmm.
And we want to, start early so that we don't end up in that position.
This is such a great point because it's really about laying the foundation of
Exactly.
a very complex identity
Yes.
not so focused on body image. And why wait for, when we talk about identity and psychology, to me, what comes to mind, I think of the teenager that's searching for themselves, right? The 17, 18-year-old who's trying to figure out who they are. But really, your 3-year-olds are trying to figure out who they are.
Mm.
And that's really the start of it. So why not start there?
Right.
Yeah.
And we know this about some other things like self-esteem, for example. I mean, we already work on that in elementary school, so it's just kind of amazing. And as Janet was saying, we choose their diets intentionally. We maybe only give them organic juice boxes or whatever. So we work on other things that we are kind of laying the foundation for later on, and we don't really expect problems with it now, but we are working preventatively to make sure that later on we optimize the chances that there aren't issues with that thing. So it's just like any of those other issues, really. We start working on body image earlier than we thought, and we have to do less later on,
Mm,
hopefully, to make it healthier.
yeah.
We had an episode, goodness, I cannot even remember when this was, what season it was, but one of the things that our guest recommended was to say about clothing, instead of it, this doesn't fit me anymore. This doesn't work for my body anymore.
Oh, that was Zoe Bisbang.
Yes. Do you
Yes, I
remember that? This
remember her.
this
Yes, of
doesn't work for my
course.
body anymore.
Yes.
And we're at the period of like, toddlers grow so fast, babies grow so fast. And so I'm repurposing her clothes and giving them to other people. And she's having feelings about that now because she's aware of, some of her favorite shirts and pants. And so
Mm,
having been able to use that language has felt like such a way to be preventative in this measure, I would say. And then we get to have fun things. And I'm just thinking about like all the dress up clothes that we have. Like it's fun for them to have, play dress up and imagine and so having like this fun concept of their bodies and of themselves, I think is
mm,
so important at this age as well.
Absolutely. And we love that point because we also talk about this idea that people have for women that you reach some ideal and you stay there, right? Like your body is not supposed to change. Get your body back after a baby. Puberty hits, and how do you avoid the weight gain? How do you avoid the freshman 15?
mm.
Now you're gaining menopausal pounds, and we have all of the ads, saying get your body back and get back into your high school jeans. And no, bodies change. They're meant to
Yeah.
change. Girls need to know that. We talk about this in our book as they're approaching tweenhood, late childhood, arming them with this idea that your body will change and that's expected and that is every bit
Hmm.
normal and fine. And don't let anybody make you feel like that's something that's, strange or odd or something that has to be, quote, dealt with. Because you're right, it's not a problem of you, right? That,
Right.
oh, the clothes, I'm supposed to fit into the clothes. No, your body's going to change. It's going to change throughout the life course for many different reasons. And it's good that you know that in advance and that you're not later feeling shame about whatever
Yeah.
weight gain or body shape changes are going to occur, especially pre-puberty. But again, when we see it midlife with menopause, women are targeted now about, the menopausal belly or whatever it is. There's always some sort
Mm,
of improvement that you need to go back to some previous state. And we can
Hmm.
say, actually, no, that's actually not what bodies do for the most part.
mm.
It's
I love
fine.
that. It's just not what bodies do, but we're sold this idea that we should do everything we can to keep our body the same. And there's lots of products to be sold to us if we buy into that for sure. Um,
Yeah.
before we move on to the next question, I just want to take a moment to kind of speak to the mothers out there that are listening that might be thinking to themselves, oh gosh, I haven't done any of this. And I'm one of the 3 factors that's going to influence my kid's body image. What do you want to say to those moms out there that might
Mm.
be like blaming themselves for their daughters having, maybe not the best body image?
Well, first of all, we want you to remember that you are not the only factor. I mean, we
Hmm.
did say there were three, and peers and media that, I mean, there's a lot of those voices that your child's going to hear. So it doesn't, her body image development doesn't rest on your shoulders alone. And, you know, the game with parenting is to just figure out pretty quickly that you're going to do some things imperfectly, right? This is 365, 24/7, you're on. And nobody is going to do everything right. And honestly, in writing the book, I had feelings like that. Oh my gosh, I'm saying that this is what science says that women should do, and I didn't do this when my daughter was 3 and 4.
Right.
And I've lost that window, you know. But it is never too late to implement this stuff. And I've had a an older woman, she's around 71, who I know, and she read the book and she said, you know, I don't even have a young daughter anymore. She said, but I've learned so much good stuff in here that helps me, um, you know, feel more healthy about who I am and what my body looks like. So,
Mm.
number one, moms are not going to get it perfect, and it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to start implementing changes at any point during the lifespan. And even some positive changes are better
Mhm.
than none. So, uh, trying to achieve perfection in this process and to raise the perfect girl with the perfect body image, I think we should just kind of relieve ourselves of that notion at the outset because that's not going to be possible. I mean, even despite all of our best attempts, at some point, the girl is going to leave our house and hopefully go off to university and have a great time with her friends. And our voices are going to kind of dim and recede into the background. And that's as it should be. Her peers will be influencing her more at that point. So no, this does not, it's not all up to mom. It is not all her responsibility. And it is okay to do some things wrong and to just work on improving the way that you talk about yourself and you behave toward yourself around your daughter. Any of that will be helpful to her.
And I think too, it's kind of vindicating for moms because we did focus groups with moms, and we talk about how successful women are and doing all the things they do day to day, and here they are struggling with body image as adults, and it's moms themselves have been victims of the culture in that sense. So it is not at all about blaming them. They have been, socialized in this same way, so they're going to
Mhm.
hold these implicit beliefs about
Mhm.
themselves, these ideas that they might not even realize they have. I think that is where the book is really helpful. We include a lot of self-reflection tools for you to think about, like, oh, that's why I think this way about myself. And it removes the sort of self-blame that you have of, why is this still a problem for me? Why is it a problem for you? Because culture has basically pummeled you with all of these messages. And now here you are as a grown woman trying to raise a child. And of course, those issues are going to come to the forefront.
Mhm.
So we're very sympathetic with moms. It's totally not about blaming you. It's we say that, it's not your fault, certainly, but it is an opportunity. That's how we see it, right? It's your opportunity to do
Mhm.
something for yourself, to introspect about, oh, wait, like let me confront some of these ideas I have and actually say, no, that's not correct. And then to assist with your daughter, helping, her develop the tools that she needs. But certainly recognizing that you're coming from that place yourself, and in all likelihood of the diet culture. It changes over time, but it's always there, right? It was there in the previous
Mhm.
generation, and it goes forth now with social media and all these other new, modalities where we get these messages.
Yes,
Mhm.
these are such great reminders. So, moms out there listening, it's not all on you. Let's leave the
Mhm.
self-blame at the door, the perfectionism at the door, and
Mhm.
let's have a little self-compassion. Yes.
Mhm. You also, in your book, you mention healthy body image building tools. And one that I would like to ask you to share more about is expand her categorical self.
Mhm.
So I was curious if you could tell us a little bit more about this tool. How do we do it? Why is it important? Go for it.
Yeah, so that again brings us back to this self-concept idea where, you're developing this vision of yourself, this understanding of who you are, what qualities you have, what you're like. And a lot of that comes from the culture, and children are super at categorizing. So if we think about the
Yeah.
categorical self, it's you're putting yourself in categories, and the basic ones, if you just think of a child who's 4, she knows that she's a girl, she knows that she's 4, she knows that she has brown eyes, for example, she knows that she loves to draw. So these are categories, right? What's
Hmm.
happening though is other categories are coming into play, and many of those are gender based. And many of those, that's where sort of some of that danger lies, right? Because now we have this understanding of what it means to be feminine, what it means to be a girl. And although we've had made some important strides in that, there are still very gendered expectations, right, about what girls are supposed to be, how they're supposed to look. So what we talk about when we say expanding the categorical self, it is again creating a lot of different categories based on her characteristics. So if she likes to, again, using the drawing example, you want to cultivate those skills. You want to have build self-efficacy or capability for her around those skills. You want to show her books of different kinds of art. You want to, if you're going to use social media, show her, hey, look at these really cool artists and what they're doing. So
Mm,
what you're doing there is you're cultivating those interests, and you can do that with a number of categories. And again, that is self-protective because, as you mentioned before, it creates something that is multifaceted, right? It's you are
Hmm.
many things. You like to draw, maybe you're on a certain team, you have all these different skills, you're funny and you like jokes. And here we are creating these categories for you that again are protective because, okay, appearance is over here. That's fine. It's all well and good, but there's so much more going on. And because children
Right.
are such great categorizers, this is an ideal time to help them build those structures. And it's pretty easy to do just by having everyday conversations about the stuff they're getting
Mm.
into. And those things will change
mm,
over time, and that's totally fine as they figure out what they like and don't like. Interests change, as you know, with
Hmm.
children. Love it
yeah.
one day, maybe not so much the next, but eventually
Yes.
stable things will emerge. And that's what, again, is going to kind of protect them is by building up multiple aspects of the self, with appearance being one little component. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Mm,
love that.
hmm. Nurturing the parts of the self that are outside of body
Yeah.
and appearance,
Hmm.
and expanding that pie chart of who you are.
Yeah.
And we can do this as early as 3 and 4.
Yes. And so that's going to be more simplistic. Younger kids don't really understand traits yet, but they understand behaviors. You like
Hmm.
to do X versus you
Mm,
are this type of person. When they're a
Hmm.
little bit older, you get into more traits, right? And you can talk about the type of person they are, the kindness that they show in the behaviors that they do. But yes, it's never too early. And just quite like, when we talk about child development, we talk about the importance of just talking to your child, even when they don't understand you, how important that is. Like talking to babies who don't
Hmm.
even understand the language yet is important. They're getting intonation and tone and
mm,
interest. They're getting trust from you. So you can have very simple conversations. You might not even feel like you're getting anywhere, but stuff is getting in there.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yes, you will tailor
Wow.
that developmentally. We talk about that in the book. We have a little section in each chapter that is developmentally relevant about, attention span of someone who's 4, what to
Hmm.
do when someone is 6, and how much time you can anticipate spending, what the cognitive sort of skills are, because that's the other piece, right? Like
Hmm.
if you're going to have impact, you need to take this developmental approach of what do kids actually understand? How long will they listen to me? Right?
Mm, mm-hmm.
How do I
Right.
make things interesting and so on and so forth. And so we kind of pack that into the tips as well so that it's not one big exercise in frustration. And this happens slowly, right? It's like every little bit helps, a little conversation in the car, right? Just those little moments that you have to talk to your
Hmm.
child. It's like use those. Absolutely.
Yeah. This doesn't
Yeah.
have to be complicated. This,
Right.
these can be really brief comments,
Absolutely.
conversations.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, I have so many more questions. And what's coming up for me, I'm thinking to myself about, my own body image. And I had a lot of Barbies growing up,
Mm.
like a lot. Like I had all the Barbies. And, when my niece is a teenager now, but when she turned, I think she was 4 or 5, I bought her some Barbies, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, did I do something wrong? Sometimes I wonder, what is the impact of Barbie dolls, toys, movies? I know like
Yeah.
princess culture is huge right now. You think about all the Disney princesses and the movies that many young girls love. What does the research say about body image
Mm.
and dolls, toys, and princess movies?
Yeah. That is a big loaded question and an important
Yeah.
question. We will say one thing to note is there's no one thing that's going to contribute to a negative body image. So if you bought a Barbie for your daughter, like if you're not, it's okay.
Ooh, what a
Doll play is
relief.
perfectly fine, right? But that said, I mean, it's a great question because there is evidence to suggest that if you're playing a lot with these very gendered, idealized dolls, it makes you more interested in vanity and appearance play. Things like
Mm,
playing with makeup, playing with hair versus other modalities of play. There's some evidence that in slightly older girls toward middle and late childhood, it's associated with dietary restraint. So feeling like you have to control your food intake. There's some evidence to suggest that it is related to body dissatisfaction. So feeling like there is something wrong with your body. You're looking at this idealized doll. So we
mm,
do have to be careful with this exposure. And really the recommendation is, it's not all bad. And I do want to make that point that to be fair, in the past decade, and there's research that bears this out, there's more diversification of doll types. And
Mm,
especially where you're minoritized, ethnic or racial minority, having dolls that portray your skin color, right? Your
mm.
racial heritage, that's actually helpful for girls' identities. So we don't want to throw the whole thing out. It's more that we want to limit it. We want to say these are not the only toys you play with, right? So that's number one, is try to provide a host of opportunities for play and avoid stuff that's fully, wholly appearance emphasis, right?
hmm
Especially idealized appearance.
Mm.
That's number one. Number two is to also look at the effects on the individual girl. For some girls, the play is just play, right? But is she commenting? Is she saying something about she doesn't look like that? Or
Mm.
the doll is so skinny, or the doll is so much prettier than she is, right? So if she's internalizing, that's maybe a warning sign for parents to minimize
mm,
that in that girl. It might be fine for another girl, right? Even amongst siblings, you might see a difference. So paying attention also to your individual daughter and what she's saying about those things is important.
Right.
And then, when they get a little bit older, introducing the whole media literacy bit. So when they're young, it's really the control is up to you to provide a host of toys. Some are going to be
hmm
gendered, some will be Barbie, some will be princess, but we want more than that. We're going to watch your reaction to that and have conversations with you if we feel like you're somehow internalizing expectations based on that. And then when you start getting a little bit older, there's ways to talk about just literacy around toys, media, representation of girls and women, what's real and what's not real. But it's a
Mm.
great question because that literature gets very complicated. It is overwhelming for parents. Like, what toys do I choose? What do I do?
hmm
Sure,
There's just a
sure.
rubric to sort of, give you a little bit of guidance, like where you can have these things. It's totally fine. You don't want to ban them. If she's interested, it's completely fine, but you want to have a diversification and you want to watch her reaction.
Yeah, that's such a good point and a good reminder that, every child is so different, and we really do
mm,
have to pay attention to how they're interacting with these things. Are they comparing themselves? Are we noticing some, I don't know, just some self-esteem issues related to
Mhm.
what they're watching? For the parents out there who are thinking to themselves, when I take my kid to the toy store, they make a beeline to the dolls. Any guidance on how to expand their interests in toys and just how to nurture a more variety, I guess.
Right. That can be a tough battle. And certainly you don't want to say no because the resistance will probably be ever greater. So it's like, we'll get the Barbie, but also how about we also choose something else? But you could also bring those things home spontaneously and ask them to consider playing with them. Having play groups, and we even suggest having play groups that aren't gendered, as in all boys or all girls, can often be helpful. So there's a mix of people and activities and toys. That's also great.
Mm,
Having parents who model using a fun new toy or puzzle is
hmm
also great to say, look at this really cool thing we can do. Let's do it together to sort of cultivate interest. You may not win. You may not win that battle, right?
right.
And that's where more of the conversations will come into play. But really, quite like with introducing them to food, it's about trying to encourage the diversity. Is there going to be some gendered play? Absolutely. And it's fine. And we're certainly, again, not saying like, don't have a Barbie in your house. But yeah, just try to push the boundaries a little bit and see what you get. Yeah.
These are such great tips and tools. Thank you so much. I know there's so many parents out there who are probably thinking, thank you for the concrete guidance. This is exactly what we need.
One of my favorite ways to diversify by play, I would say, is also reading. We love reading. And when we're in the car, one thing that we've done is give these, they're like picture books, but they have the little flaps that you can pull up. And that girl just does great in the car, and she is just glued to those books. And it's so cool because you can learn so many things, that way as well. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's so fun. Well, you all, okay, so another question that I want to bring up is, well, and to I guess also talk about a lot of the patients that we treat in the work that we do with eating disorders. We navigate frequently appropriate movement or exercise. And so I was curious if you all had guidance about what kind of language we could bring into the room with our children to talk about movement in a fun and helpful way and
Mm.
not have it be anything other than that.
Yes, and that's great. Researchers have recently brought attention to the idea that, preschool age is a time to cultivate love of moving your body. And it's
Yeah.
love of movement, right? It's joy of movement, it's play essentially. And that young kids typically enjoy moving their bodies until later we tell them that you have to do this, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
In young kids, we want to just encourage how fun it is to move our bodies around. Our bodies are made to move. Let's go to the playground. Let's have a YouTube dance party, right? Like there's so
Yes.
many ways you can do it simply. You can go across the street, you can go on the lawn, you can stay in the home. It does not have to take up a bunch of time, but children do need to be moving. That's an important message early on, and we want to develop that as a habit that they like. The key in terms of not getting us into trouble developmentally is not attaching that to the right to eat, right?
Mm.
So
Hmm.
eventually
Yes.
what happens is
Right.
there's this connection with, you know, you're allowed to eat as a woman. All those memes we know where
Mm.
if you eat the Snickers bar, you'd better be ready to spend 45 minutes on the elliptical machine.
It's like
I
the
mean,
earning and burning
yeah,
mentality.
yeah,
Right.
you do
Yeah.
not need to earn food. And if anything,
No.
we want to teach our children the opposite. If we're moving our bodies, we need energy. Let's think about what foods will help us have energy so that you
Yeah.
can jump as high as you want to jump or you can play that game. But in young
Mm.
ones, unstructured movement is best. I mean, if you put them on a team, it's just laughable and fun. That's also cool, right? Just unstructured, no rules, let you move your body the way that you want. Let them be a little adventurous. We talk about that in the book. Like it can be kind of scary when you're letting them go on the monkey bars and you're like, uh-oh, face plant up
Hmm.
ahead. But
Mm.
you don't want them to be fearful of movement. So you kind of have to, hold your breath a little bit and let that happen. Making sure that they don't associate exercise with self-improvement as they get older. That's the other thing we're taught, right? Like our bodies are these self-improvement projects and you'd better be ready to do these kinds of movements. And so again, we don't attach it to food. We don't attach it to this idea that you have to improve anything. We attach it to, we appreciate our bodies. We want to cultivate what we call body respect and appreciation. We
Mm.
appreciate
Hmm.
that our bodies can do all these great things. And guess what? We have to take care of them, right? Just like we
Hmm.
brush our teeth and do other things. We want to take care of our muscles. We want our muscles to grow. We want to eat properly. And so that's where you can start to cultivate really health behaviors, independent of weight, independent of physical appearance. That shouldn't enter into the equation, right? Eventually, again, the culture is going to hit them with that, but you're already cultivating these other ideas around what it means to be a healthy person and what it means to have a healthy body image. I do want to know, we talk in the book about aesthetic sports. That's an arena where you have to be a little bit more careful. Aesthetic sports like ballet, for
Mm.
Mm.
example, gymnastics, nothing wrong with those, right? If a girl's really interested in that, fantastic. You do want to, though, look at what is the school like? What are the teachers or coaches like to make sure that
Yeah.
there isn't that body talk that goes on in those sports, because we do know those tend to be very appearance bound. And so
Mm.
there you just want to talk about what is the philosophy of the school if I'm going to allow my daughter to dance here, right? Making sure that it's not geared toward, talking about her round tummy as she's practicing her plie, the kinds of comments, right, that teachers might make and hopefully are not making. But that's an arena where you would want to do the legwork to say, okay, like if we're going to enroll you in this, let's see what the philosophy of the school and the teachers is. Yeah.
Such a helpful piece of advice there.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And, we talk a lot on this podcast about the risk factors for eating disorders
Yeah.
and, sports, weight sensitive sports, sports with a lean aesthetic, it's a risk
Yes.
factor. And it
Yes.
is, I love the framing of, how important it is to do the legwork and make sure coaches are inclusive and aren't body shaming. And it can make a big difference for a
Mhm.
child who really enjoys that sort of activity. Um, oh gosh, I have more questions. Where do we even begin? I feel like we could talk to you for hours and hours. So we talked about exercise. Can we move on from, we talked a lot about 3 and 4 years old, 3 and 4
Hmm.
year olds. What about children 5 to 7? You talk about this in your book. This is the
Hmm.
point in childhood where children understand the meaning of the word diet.
Mhm.
There
Mm.
was a study you referenced in your book about 30% of 5 to 7 year old girls said that they would hypothetically go on a diet.
Mm.
Ah, scary. Diets are the biggest risk factor for an eating disorder, by the way. You wrote that this is a really good time for parents to implement what you call food parenting practices. What does this mean? How can we help our girls during this time?
Yeah, and that's another area where we're kind of missing education. We have physical literacy, then we also have food or nutritional literacy. And, what does it mean to create a healthful environment? That's really what we're talking about. And it's a good time to start this at that age range because you start to see like more consistent eating patterns. I mean, kids are, again, tastes are fickle. Love this meal one day, the next day it's the worst thing ever.
Mhm.
For the most
Yeah.
part, you start to see more consistency and more ability to sit at a dinner table, engage in eating practices. And you want routines around food and eating that are calm, that are positive, right? It's not an anxiety provoking atmosphere. And again, this is not at all, to blame mom or whoever's sitting around the table, but your messages around the table are going to be heard. So if you're
Mm,
saying something like, I shouldn't be eating this
Yeah.
too much, I can't, right? Or making comments about your body, or even things that you're not doing if you're not eating. If you're the mom
mm,
who's feeding everyone and you're not eating, that's encoded, right? If you're showing that anxiety, then that's being picked up upon. So trying to avoid that type of atmosphere is, and that is hard work. And again, that is not to blame moms. It gives moms an opportunity to think about, ooh, like, why am I doing this to myself too, right? Why am I punishing myself and saying I'm not allowed to have the pie, but everybody else is?
mm,
It also involves, presenting a host or an array of foods, including fun foods,
Mm.
and letting it be, not moralizing foods, not creating an environment where something you're constantly saying, don't eat that, it's bad for you, or it's good for
Mm.
you, right? There's times to eat certain kinds of food. That's a good way to talk about it. Is this the right time to eat this kind of food? Maybe not. But you want to present a diversity of foods. You want to give children the autonomy to choose foods and not hover every minute about eat this, eat that, right? They actually are pretty good at self-regulating. If you look at young kids, they usually know pretty well when they're full. They start to get messages that mess up their natural eating patterns
Yeah.
because we're the ones interfering, right, with those
Yes.
things. And so we really want to emphasize just letting them take the lead sort of more intuitively, not moralizing food, trying to avoid good and bad. And also, saying something like the food is healthy for you tends to backfire.
yeah.
So that's just not going to be the winner of the night, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
more like, would you consider having some of this? Try putting this food on your plate and leave it be, and it will happen. You'll model it, but really, it's having calmness, consistency in the types of presentation of foods, allowing for a host of different foods, and trying to avoid the shoulds and the don'ts and those kinds of things. Monitoring yourself a little bit more around the table, which I recognize is difficult, but is an important thing to consider and to try. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. You
I,
all,
go ahead,
go
Ashley.
ahead, Sam.
Go ahead.
Um, I was going to say we are running out of time. So I have another question for you, and I was hoping that maybe we could kind of end with this one. In the back of your book, there's an appendix filled with wonderful ideas and activities that parents can engage in. So for the parents and the moms listening today, um, what would be something that they could start with this week, both with
Mm.
their child and with themselves?
I think for moms, one of the most important things is to gain self-awareness about their attitudes toward their body and the behaviors that they do. Um, this is not something most of us sit around thinking of very deeply. But researchers in psychology have actually developed questionnaires that you can take that will tell you about your perfectionism tendencies or your social comparison tendencies, your neuroticism, for example. One of the things we do in the book is offer moms the opportunity to take some of these self-assessments just to learn where they stand on these to become a little bit more self-aware.
Mm.
We also offer for moms some guided reflection activities to do to kind of think about here's where I am currently with my body image, here's my goals for myself, here's what I'd like to see for my daughter. Just becoming more intentional about approaching the whole process and doing it with, like science informed strategies. And then for daughters, we want to make it a little bit more fun than questionnaires because they're not going to sit around for that very long. So we've come up with a number of activities and suggestions that are aimed at kids based on where they are in childhood. So the ones that we have for 3-year-olds don't look like the activities we have for 10-year-olds. But I'll just give you one example of an activity that we have for mom and daughter to do together, to go on some sort of nature walk or photography field trip, and to make sure to keep the camera or the phone pointed outward. So the goal is to come out of that little trip there with no selfies and no poses, but to capture somehow still the fun that you had that day and the good feelings and memories that you created together without making it need to be picture worthy, Instagram worthy, whatever it is that they say. So keeping the photography geared outward rather than inward. That's one tangible activity we have. But we have others for the littlest girls. We have some activities to kind of get them thinking about what their skills are, what are they really good at doing, and kind of we have them make a little crown that they're the queen of doing these activities because they're so awesome at them. So helping them come up with definitions for themselves that don't involve their appearance.
Mm.
Yeah. I love that so much. We just went to the zoo yesterday. So there were some outward facing pictures, but there
Yeah.
were definitely some selfies that were taken.
And we want to be in the pictures too. So,
Right.
we shouldn't banish ourselves from the pictures. But I was recently on a vacation, and I was out on a boat and just had opportunity to observe a little girl. We're on a boat in outside of Maine, just looking at all of the spectacular scenery. And just like for 10 minutes, this girl is just taking selfies and posing for them. And I thought of all the natural, awesome beauty that was just going right by as the selfies were being recorded. So it's just, not ruling anything out, but doing things in moderation and making sure that we're broadening what kids might be doing if they're left undirected.
Yeah, and
Yes.
a lot of the
Right.
activities are quick and easy. We have Lunchbox Love Notes, which is just writing something that you love about her and the skills she has that when she, is thinking about herself, she can refer to those. And again, that's building up that self-concept in a way that you're not referring to physical attributes, but all these amazing skills she shows, right? The amazing person that she is. And that takes you minutes to do. And so there's lots of tips there, again, as Ashley was saying, that are developmentally relevant that moms can implement pretty easily, and they'll find the ones that they like. And those are optional too, but I think that they're fun and they really help build the skills. Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of all, we just really wanted to give moms tangible things that they could do instead of
Yes.
just giving them broad general advice, like do
Yes.
this. We wanted to say, here's some ways that you can do this. This is what this might look like depending on, what your
Mm.
child's interested in.
Yes.
That's really what I loved so much about your book is that it's filled with research and includes so many real life doable activities and ideas that mothers can implement immediately. And
Mhm.
I think it's really empowering to read this book and feel like you have this whole toolbox of tools that you can
Mhm.
use. So thank you so much for writing this. I can't wait to share this with our audience. I hope they share it with mothers that they know. I hope that this spreads far and wide, but I know we're just about out of time. If we could just pick one takeaway, a final word of wisdom for our listeners, or maybe a resource you'd like to share, what would you like our audience to leave with today?
I mean, I think you just said it, right? This is empowerment. It's you have the agency, you're in the driver's seat, and culture might try to lead you to believe otherwise, but you can actually say, no, this is how we do it, right?
Mm,
And I can be intentional about creating healthy body image for myself, improving my body image, and helping my daughter and other little girls that I love do that as well.
Mm,
And
love it.
also that we're not the passive recipients of what culture is throwing at us.
Yes.
We really did want to empower moms with this book, and you are the first influencer in her life. So take that opportunity and use it wisely.
Yes. Ashley, Janet, thank you so much. This was such a treat. And yeah, we just really appreciate it. And we want to say thank you again to our wonderful listeners, and we hope that you all enjoyed this. Thanks.